Millennials, welcome to Millennial Focus Group. I'm Jamie.
And I'm Kimmy.
And we have some friends here with us today because we are going to do the great debate of Dungeons & Dragons editions. We're here today to talk about the pros and cons of each edition and try to figure out scientifically, emotionally, through an epic journey, which edition is truly the best. So, here to rep 3.5 is our friend Matt. Say hi, Matt.
Hey, everybody.
And we have two guests here to rep 5E. We have Justin, who we've met before on the show.
Howdy.
And we have James. Say hi, James.
Hello.
All right, so some basic rules on how this is going to work. I do have a scoring card for the Great Debate, but I will not reveal the categories or the points accumulated until the end of the podcast. Basically, the point is for you at home listening to enjoy every argument made by all of the combatants, if you will, and decide, based on our arguments, which edition do you agree with as the best edition for Dungeons & Dragons. But I will reveal the quote-unquote winning edition at the end of the episode. I do have some guiding questions that I will use to keep us on track during this discussion, but it could go to some pretty crazy places, so we'll see what happens. We are just going to jump right in, I think. So, Kimmy and I are going to be going to bat for AD&D 2nd edition up against 3.5 and 5E, and I'm just going to throw the first question out, and somebody can jump on that like a hungry shark. Question number 1, how creative are players allowed to be? And go.
All right.
Lots of creative for 5e. Boom. Resolved. We win.
Honestly, I think that's one of the areas that 5e loses out on the most.
Really?
I think 5e is simpler, and because of that, you can't do as much crazy stuff in 5e. You can't multi-class your rogue with a ranger, throw in a little bit of swashbuckler, and create this random crazy character that can do 12 things that's not determined by your PHP.
Well, I mean, not with that attitude. There is multi-classing rules of the PHP. And you can actually do rogue with ranger because there's not nearly as many restrictions with the classes. You just have to have certain base stats in order to do those multi-classing.
But with that in 5e, you tend to lose out on all the major benefits of going up in those classes, which tend to be massive in 5e. Whereas in 3.5, you just build upon pre-established things. You get another sneak attack die, you get another favorite enemy. You don't lose out on entire feats, because you get feats for leveling up. Your feats are built into your characters in 5e, and to get the better feats, you have to stay in a single class.
While we're on that topic, I'm just going to throw in the same point with AD&D. I do think that you have more flexibility in character creation in certain aspects when it comes to multi-classing specifically. So in AD&D, you can multi-class 2 or 3 classes depending on what race you are, and you level up in those classes simultaneously. So your character's powers and abilities are growing exponentially as you continue to level up, instead of only being able to access a couple of abilities from 2 different classes. And I like that you can do it simultaneously. I feel like it's more realistic for the storytelling aspect of the game. You're not going to stop training as a fighter and start training as a ranger for a couple months and then go back to training as a fighter. You're gaining these skills simultaneously. So when you're multi-classing in AD&D and learning and building on your skills simultaneously, I feel like it helps create a more well-rounded character that makes more sense in the world itself.
No, that's fair. Like, 5e is multi-classing. You know, your total level is going to be 20. So if you even pull just one level in another class, you're never going to reach that pinnacle of your first class. So you're never going to get to level 20 because you'll always be dragged down by your second class. Outside of multi-classing, I feel 5e has a lot to offer as far as creativity. Because looking only at the PHP, you have 9 different races and 12 different classes. And that's only the PHP. And there are multiple books that have introduced new races and classes that are playable. Just from the PHB, you're getting 108 different racing class combinations. So it opens up a huge avenue for whatever you want to do. You want to play a not tiefling rogue because that's too edgy.
There's actually one specific race and class combination you can't play, and that's tiefling rogue, unless you're playing a Sith Lord, which just doesn't work well.
But yeah, so in that aspect, I think 5e has a leg up as far as branching out from your human into X class route.
How many did you say you could make in that?
108.
All right, so you can make 154 just out of the PHB in 3.5.
Okay, fair enough.
Okay, I can't tell you how much you can make in AD&D because I will tell you it is.
Multiply the number of races by the number.
It doesn't
of
work that
classes.
way, and
That's
here's
right,
my
you're
point.
Right.
So I know James was jumping on that one.
Yeah,
too.
you take it from me because you knew I was going for it.
So yes, the thing that is different from your from actually both 3.5 and 5e is that AD&D does not allow you to just use any race with any class. I actually think that's really, really good for the storytelling aspect, and I think it's really good for creativity because it gives you that challenge for you to role play out. If you want a character to be something, you can make a character that, like, you can pick a race and it can always be wanting to be a certain class. And that, I think, is a lot of, like, creativity and fun on top of the storytelling. But I like that those challenges are put in place because I think it makes the storytelling more just easier to follow. There's not so much chaos going on in the world that it almost feels like there's just too much. And it's like, I don't know, I like being simpler.
So to build on Kimmy's point, there are race class restrictions, and this is what I feel. I feel that people enjoy 5e because you can be any race, any class. You can truly play any character with no real limitations. You can be a dwarf wizard. You can be a halfling fighter. You can be a gnome barbarian.
Mm-hmm.
You can be anything. Which, sure, a lot of people love that. It's awesome. There's a lot of freedom, and it gets rid of the sort of, like, undertones of, I don't know, I don't want to call it racism because it's not, but, like, stereotypes in the races. It gets rid of that a little bit in 5e. And so I think it makes a lot of people feel more comfortable and not like they're making stereotypes about characters, which are obviously like people that their players are getting attached to. However, I think for the game like Dungeons & Dragons, having that race class restriction is something that forces there to truly be pros and cons to which class and race you choose. In 5e, I think everything is a lot more balanced across the board, but it's also less exciting then to choose a race and a class because it's almost like it doesn't matter as much as in AD&D. It truly matters what race you choose in AD&D because there will be cons to picking that race, and there will be specific pros that are truly different from the other races.
In terms of the question we are currently asking, though, you would agree that you are not allowed to be as creative as 3.5 or 5e, correct?
No. And the reason I want to... I think you have to be more creative for your storytelling and for it to be more fun because it's like... I just don't know how to explain it.
How are we defining creativity then? Like, are we defining it by how many options do you have? What type of variety of characters can you make? Or are we defining it by within a limited scope of options, how creative does the player have to be to play the game?
I want to talk about then, I'm going to go right into mechanics about this because there's the mechanics that you have the percentage die roll, and you can use the percentage die roll on almost any action you want. 5e especially doesn't really do that because you have proficiencies. Those are your checks. But in AD&D, you had the percentage rule. So your character could be creative and literally try to do anything it wanted. And instead of trying to just fit it into a box, okay, that would be a performance check. Or that would be, and then you just roll a d20 and you either fail or you do it. In percentage rolls, you were like, you kind of did it, you really did it, you totally failed.
That still exists within 5e. That's not something that has gone away. We're not using the D100 anymore, but that's not really any big of it, like any sort of a difference. A D100, I have never seen a stat table that is legitimately published that has a different, completely unique result per one on the 100. You're still roughly grouping them into how many levels of success there would be on a D20 roll. And even in the PHB for 5e, they have explicit things laid out as variant rules where it's like, oh, maybe in this particular case, your athletics check would be governed by your dexterity skill, or it would be governed by your charisma skill. I don't know how you really do that, but
let's go back.
You can tweak them and make up skills is what I'm getting at. It's not...
Sure, that's fair. I think that's fair. Let's go back, though, to the actual character creation aspect, not necessarily playing your character just yet. I feel like there are points that we have not made about character creation, so let's not get too off track just yet.
I would agree with that. So one of the points I was going to make about 3.5, and I believe AD&D, is feats are not built into your class in 3.5, and that gives you a ton more freedom to be creative, to do crazy things with your character. In 3.5, there are like 15 pages of feats. In 5e, I think there's 4. It's far more limited, and feats are considered an optional thing in 5e. You're not actually supposed to take them. It's an optional variant to take them instead of an ability score increase.
So I will rebuttal that, I guess, because 3.5 and AD&D don't have feats or class abilities within theirs. They have those feats that you can select, and 5e's are shorter, but that is because you have subclasses within each class that give you variants on your class abilities, and then you get options to pull additional feats to make your character into whatever you want.
But those subclasses are limited to what Wizards writes. You have your 2 to 3 subclasses per class, and you can add a few extra feats if you choose to forego ability scores, whereas in 3.5, and I believe in AD&D, you're getting those feats every 2 to 3 levels. You get a new feat to tack on to your class's abilities. So that gives you creative freedom.
True. So just to clarify, in AD&D, there are no feats. There are proficiencies, which are not limited to race or class. And any character can get any proficiencies. It's an optional part of the game. It even says optional in the character or in the player handbook. So what I'm hearing right now, there's a divide in which edition is truly allowing more creativity because, yes, you can play more race and class combos in 5e, but you are also restricted to your character's abilities, whereas in AD&D and to an extent 3.5, you are limited on your race-class combos, but your character can train or gain proficiencies in a wider range of abilities.
Well, so I want to get a better understanding, and this is maybe coming from me as someone who has not spent very much time at all with 3.5 as opposed to 5e or even AD&D. When we're talking about feats and abilities here, like there are feats in the player handbook, and then there are class abilities that you gain, and you're talking about every level or two you're getting a new feat from this.
3 levels, I believe, you can choose a feat from. This is the table from
so
just the PHP.
What is then in your base class that you have access to, and is equally to help me along with people that may not be familiar with 3.5.
With a rogue in your base class, you get sneak attack is one of their huge things that they get.
Yeah, which is
you
the same
get certain skills that you're proficient in. As a ranger, you get favored enemies is their huge thing. They
you
also
get tracking.
You get tracking. Yep. Paladins get like smite, lay on hands. Wizards, sorcerers, they get more spells per day, more spell slots. The big, like, all those things that are built into your character class, though, in 5e, those, like, crazy abilities that you get for picking a subclass, those are broken out. And you can pick and choose those to add to your class. So, like, you can make a ranger who's a close weapon fighting specialist.
So it's much more of an a la carte system with their abilities. But then at the same time, after initially establishing your character, it sounds like you're effectively barely a class and more of just a player character that started with a bow and the base ranger skills, because then from there you're picking feats. At least that's how it sounds to me.
Yeah.
Correct me if I'm wrong.
Exactly.
I like
which
that
Is,
Like,
point though, because that's the creative
which
point.
is the creative freedom.
That's the creative freedom to really make.
You pick a base outline for your class.
Sure.
Is basically a base outline with a few key abilities that make that class its class, and then the feats are how you can make that class whatever you want. And that's also why multi-classing is a big thing in 3.5, is you just build upon that same base thing as your class. So once you get to a point where you're like, I'm happy having 3d6 sneak attack dice, you can be like, I'm going to go monk, and I'm going to start getting key and start doing monk stuff, like parrying arrows and having some base armor class.
See, that's something like in 5e that I really like, that I feel like it kind of blends the two systems together in a way that allows for a lot of creative freedom. You have the ability to pick any class with any character, which you say that breeds more creativity. I personally think that kind of stifles it in this case. In general, I feel like the restrictions, if we're talking about giving people creative freedom, should be something that you have more options, and then the DM enforces the restrictions, not the book restrictions enforces the restrictions. So in the racial case, like, if I want to be a rogue thief, it should be up to my DM to say, I'm not allowing that at this table, not the book saying, that combo doesn't work, we didn't balance for that.
Right, and that's okay, but the thing that I'm thinking of creative is I get to pick every little thing that my character does, and I get the option for them to be able to do whatever they want. Even if they're this class and race, there's still these options, where in 5e, it's picking and choosing.
Can I make a counterpoint to everybody?
Yeah.
I think the ability to pick and choose all of these different abilities is actually overwhelming and makes the game less enjoyable. I enjoy the simplicity of AD&D and that each race has specific abilities and each class has specific skills that make you want to choose that race and that class specifically, and I like that there's not as many things to choose when you're leveling up, because I've played a few 5e campaigns and I have just been overwhelmed with the amount of choices every time I've played. So to an extent, I'd rather focus on the creativity of what my character can do in the world while I'm a player than like building my character, checking off boxes, talking about proficiencies, talking about abilities, adding them to my character sheet every time I level up, trying to keep track of everything I can do. I'd rather have more ability to improvise with my character's actions, which I feel like is easier to do in AD&D. I just think that is the part of the creativity that I enjoy. I don't enjoy as much the ability to choose from different feats and abilities.
That's fair.
Proficiencies.
That said, though, that sounds like a personal preference for you, and
Sure,
getting
absolutely.
overwhelmed by options, not necessarily something that like the more kind of guidelined character creation approach that AD&D has, where there are certain restrictions and guide rails to stop you from going crazy with it and having too many options. It helps you with the character creation process, but it doesn't necessarily give you as many options.
At the same time, even though it gives you fewer options, it does force you to create a character that isn't overpowered and can work along with other characters in the party instead of everybody being this super powerful character with all of these different abilities. You need to rely on your other party members more to create a balanced party, and I think that makes it more interesting.
I'm going to throw it out there. 3.5 is the version that has 0 guide rails. They looked at AD&D and they were like, we're going to take all those things that you can't do, and we're going to let you do them.
You want to know how I
It's
knew
up
that
to you.
ahead of time? Is I opened that book, and I immediately was overwhelmed by options.
Did the 25 pages of combat throw you off?
Yeah, I opened it, I was like, that's still rogues. Okay, cool.
No, that's one of the reasons I love 3.5, because you can do anything and everything is accounted for. And I hate 3.5 because you can do anything and everything is accounted for.
And I like in AD&D that like I get to create this character in my head, and I have a world that has guidelines, but not held tight to these proficiencies and abilities like from my race and class. I still can have whatever, and I don't think it. To me, just picking and choosing things somebody else already thought of, I don't find that as fun or creative as I do in AD&D, because in AD&D I feel like I actually get to paint my character, where in this one it's like a number color. You know, like you color in the numbers.
But why can't you do that in 5e with the options that we have?
Because since there is options, there's like, you just can't go that little extra. There's not that room for like improvisation, like on top of that.
I think there's plenty of room for improv.
So here's where I'm sitting right now, because we have the restrictions here. We have 0 restrictions here. We have lots of options with pre-built things here. As far as the creativity aspect is what we're on to start with. My immediate thought goes to 3.5. The reason being, no guide rails. Now, I'm going to kick back on the creativity side for AD&D, because you're putting barriers in front of a player's creativity. You're forcing them to be more thoughtful with their role play and the narrative that they're pushing. But as far as I've come in to a game with this idea in my head, and I want to jump into that game and not have to worry about not being able to do something. And I think AD&D can't say that.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think 5e can say that either, because I have played multiple characters that there are things my character should be able to do and wants to do, and there's no way I'm going to win any of those roles. There's no way that my character can, because of a class or race that I chose. But but in AD&D, I feel like you have, and again, it comes back to the percentage rules, and it comes back to having to be creative and explaining in the story how my character should be able to do this.
That's what the whole design of the races are. They took the guide rails off for that. You can pick whoever you want and be whatever you want. But yes, you aren't going to be successful because a Goliath is never going to be as stealthy as a gnome. They're massive. You want to play that? Cool. You get the option, but know that you might suck at it. That's up to you to pay attention to the stats and build the character in a way that makes sense. There are still ways to like make strategic builds in that edition, but you have the option if you want to go crazy and play that gnome barbarian, you can do it. You might not be as strong as a Goliath barbarian, but you can do it.
Can you two, fighting for 5e, make a good argument that players are allowed to be flexible during character creation and during actual play?
I think so.
Absolutely.
Make it.
Okay.
I thought that's what we've been doing.
Yeah.
I haven't heard you explicitly
Flexible in character creation as in how?
Like, okay, so you have race and class combos, but you have not given a rebuttal for the fact that you are limited to the proficiencies and skills that are described in your race and class chapters in the player handbook.
Sure. So you take the proficiencies that you have. You also have options that we didn't even dig into from a creative and role-playing perspective, such as your background that you can flesh out that continue to give you more proficiencies, give you more things that you're good with, tools that you're skilled with, more options and abilities that you have, and flesh that character out further. They even give you role-playing ideas for people that maybe want a template starting place but don't want to like have to think of everything from scratch. You have those things built in there as helpers, but not enforced.
Gonna throw it out there. The fact that they have pre-built backgrounds that you can pick from is not a point in the favor of creativity and flexibility.
Yeah, because it's
I
written,
know
it's already been
it
thought
is.
of and created, and so that's not creativity for the player.
So what they're there for is to give you something mechanically for what you've established as your backstory. That's what backgrounds are there for. It's not railroading you into anything else. It's there to serve as a mechanical indicator for your background.
When I run a game for 5e, I typically will have the players come up with their backstory on their own, tell me a little bit about it, and then I'll go through, take a look at the backgrounds, and be like, this one mechanically would give you the bonuses that someone with that background would have.
Right, and we do the same thing in AD&D. It's just you just explain to the DM, this is my character's background, and the DM makes, it is laid out a bit in the character races about kind of the land they come from, kind of how they act, like they do in all of the versions.
I did check, and they're pretty similar in that they give a little bit of description for each class and race and examples of how they might behave. So every single edition does that.
But I feel like it's not as creative for the character or for the player to just pick the background somebody else has already thought of, so you can get the mechanics of the background that somebody has already created. You're just now adding it to your character. Where in AD&D, it kind of forces you to be creative and to play.
So, but with 5e, you've got, again, the best of both worlds. So in AD&D, you can be told no, which to me does not say anything for creativity. If you can say, I want to do this, and the DM says that's not how the rules work, or the book even tells you that's not how this works, a dwarf can never be this class, or you can never have this skill because you are this race or this class. That immediately stifles creativity. And at the same time, for character creation, if someone has an idea and wants to be creative and sitting down, 5e's rules are loose enough that you can spin a character up pretty quickly, sit down, have it going. You've got the proficiencies that cover the blanket skills. It says variants in the player handbook that's enough that it's like, oh, anything can be kind of swapped out and play it freestyle, so you can improv as you want. There's not 15 calculations and 20 different skills that you have to write down in order to understand how your player works. So it's not so rules heavy. You spend 3 hours building your character just to half know what's going on.
Yeah, but those 3 hours are 3 hours that you're being creative. You have full flexibility to do whatever you want with your character. That's why it takes,
I would
3
argue
hours
one
minimum.
of the 3 hours is being creative, and the other 2 are spent writing down numbers and doing calculations.
I want to rebuttal that you say that. In AD&D, we tell you no. In AD&D, we don't tell you no. In AD&D, we say, how could your character do that? And that's that creative role playing. Like, okay, so you're a big guy that's probably not good at being sneaky, but you're still going to try. And if you're creative and how you try, you have your percentage roll to back you up, it can happen.
I will just say, as a player, and maybe this says more about the people who have been my DMs, I have been told, no, there's no way to do that, more often in 5e than ever in AD&D. And I've had several DMs in AD&D and several different DMs in 5e, and I've been told no more often in 5e because of game mechanics not related to character creation. So maybe that's not helpful in this situation, but I have just wanted to say I have been told no more often in 5e.
That's a fair anecdote.
I will say that's a DM fault. They are not laid out rules for how you handle a lot of situations in 5e, but if someone comes up with a great idea, you can usually come up with a decent challenge rating for the role, or you can usually come up with, well, that's probably how this will work, and I'm the DM, so I say that's how this will work.
And they encourage that in AD&D.
They encourage it in 5e as well, and 3.5.
Okay, so on that point, I feel like we're all equal. However, which edition allows truly the most improv in, like, while characters are playing? Have we kind of handled that?
I think ours do, because of what I just said. That if it allows, because of the percentage mechanic that you have, it allows because there's not so much of, I have to look at my sheet and see everything that my character's proficient in, and then I got to try to morph it this way. Just tell your GM
I can't be a gnome barbarian, so AD&D loses. Honestly, I feel like that's a huge bash against it. Like, I can't be something. If I can sit down and say, I want to do this, and they say no, your edition loses.
Yeah, I feel like you're not allowing me to play my half-orc wizard, who was a janitor at the wizard school, and then decided he could learn magic.
He's like Wizard Rain Man.
I just think having the character and the classes fit into the world and the story it allows for the game to almost run a bit more smoothly. I feel with all these like chaotic mix matches, it's almost good to like be a DM buster. To bust the game.
I'm gonna remember that point when we get back to mechanics and you start arguing about how 20s work and everything, and I try and say that that 5e keeps things more grounded, because you're arguing for these combinations make things make more sense. I'm gonna keep that up here.
Okay,
that's fine.
But you're saying, okay, this edition is better because I can be anybody I want to be. Well, how well does your edition lend itself to character development throughout your campaign?
That's entirely on the player. You evolve your character and grow your... Are you talking mechanically, or are you talking backstory-wise?
I'm talking you're sitting down to play this game. Which edition allows for the best character development?
As far as leveling up and building your character, 5e is terrible at it. I love
agree.
playing 5e. 5e is terrible.
Are we talking leveling up and getting abilities, or are we talking about developing your story as a character?
Both. You
Because
can
when I
make
hear
whichever
character
point.
development, I think that is entirely on the player.
Yeah.
And that's where my claim came from. That's entirely on you to grow and evolve your
Gonna
character.
be equal across all the versions.
Except for 4e, because it's a combat sim.
4e. You'll notice we don't have a 4e rep at this table.
Because you lost. Stay outside, Kyle.
Fucking Josh.
We beat him up and threw him out. He wasn't allowed in.
I think, again, what James is saying, that the narrative push is on the player to make sure that they are the one that is moving their character down their narrative line, but it's also on the DM to present those storytelling opportunities. Now, that's something that you have to address in all editions, in a session 0, what type of campaign you're running. If it is not a narrative, character development driven campaign, that's a moot point. I don't think any edition says, oh yes, we are far better at doing this than any of the others, because it is entirely on the player and DM.
Although I have seen in the AD&D handbook more instances where it's specifically stating that characters should gain this ability or gain this weapon proficiency or gain this warhorse or whatever through a quest or through an interaction laid out by their DM, and it encourages a lot more building and storytelling and character development in the game, whereas I've read through 5e books and I've never seen that kind of thing encouraged. It almost seems like it's just something you get when you level up, which doesn't feel as natural for your character.
I will say that that's something that I think is a boon for the DM, and that's a good thing. They give you prompts to help DMs that don't have as many experiences with creating unique experiences for the players. They give you those prompts as to here's a way you can maybe introduce that. That doesn't mean that those abilities couldn't be gained without the prompt as a DM. You come up with the reason that the player gets the horse or gets the weapon or whatever. You introduce those in unique ways. I had a character in one of my campaigns change his paladin path, and I did it by he died and almost entirely failed his death saves, and I had him have a brief commune with his god, and he changed his goals entirely after speaking to his god, and we found a unique mechanical way to introduce new abilities to him that also served the story. But that's on the DM and the player. Them giving you prompts, I don't know if it's really a bonus. It seems more like a guide rail, though a loose one.
I feel like the only thing you brought up that has to do with leveling in 3.5 or 5e is the proficiencies. Getting magic items, getting weapons, getting anything else happens through gameplay in both systems. You don't get new items as you level up in 5e or in 3.5. You get them as you play through your narrative.
Well, you just don't get your mount because you're a level 9 like ranger or whatever. You just don't get it. I mean, like you said.
You just don't get a mount in 5e unless you buy one, or you get like a spell.
No,
Summon steed, baby.
But I do think that if we want to talk about other aspects of leveling up, I do think that AD&D truly allows your character to grow and become more powerful, whereas in 5e, and I can't say much about 3.5, it seems like you can just either increase your ability modifiers or gain feats. But in 5e, it just seems like you're gaining more powers and more abilities that you have to keep track of, but you're not actually necessarily stronger. Because a lot of, like your ability modifiers and your saving throws don't change as often as they do in AD&D. And you could say that that's a good thing, but to me, I feel like my character is leveling up. I feel like my character is growing and becoming more powerful in AD&D. I don't feel that way as often in 5e.
I will say that... Go ahead, I'm sorry.
So that's kind of odd to me, because you're almost every time, if you're a combat-based class in 5e, you're leveling up your attack scores, you're leveling up how much damage you do. You increase attributes every 2 to 3 levels.
Yeah, like every 2 to 3 levels, not every level something is changing.
But you're increasing your... Depending on your class, like with wizards, you're getting new spells every level, or new spell slots. You're getting more health, you're getting more... I believe it's attack proficiency. I don't remember exactly what it's called.
Proficiency goes up every once in a while.
Okay.
On every level.
But you definitely feel stronger most of the time you level up in 5e.
I guess I just disagree. I just think that the change between levels isn't as dramatic as it is in AD&D.
Maybe not
I
as
agree that it's there, but I don't think it's as dramatic.
maybe not as dramatic, but 5e was designed also with the idea that things are going to be a little bit more balanced even at high levels. Your character, the threats you're fighting will be leveling up with you typically, and that's also
They do
kind of
in AD&D as well.
yeah, but you don't become a god literally by level 20 most of the time, though I think monks basically are there by the end. You still are dealing with things that are proper challenges to you most of the time, so you might not feel as powerful that way because the DM is running challenges that are appropriate for your characters, and you should still feel that tenseness. You shouldn't just steamroll over every single thing that you're coming up against.
I don't think you steamroll over your enemies in AD&D either, but I do think even with stronger enemies to fight, your abilities are drastically better and you're dealing more damage and you have gained more unique skills
So
as you level.
with 5e, what you're looking at is, at 4th level, at 8th level, at 12th, you are able to put your level up your ability scores. So that's making your attacks hit more often, hit harder. When you're looking at class abilities, your damage for those goes up. So monks, your damage die changes.
Not very often. But like you said, just a few times.
Yeah, but
the
you can
entire
hit like
time.
8 times.
You gain something every time you level up in 5e, which
Okay.
you don't in 3.5. I will say that is a negative in 3.5. There are some levels you hit where you don't get a feat or an attribute gain, and your class level up is just kind of
There's a couple like that.
You're using monk as an example, but I'm playing a monk right now, and there's not a drastic difference as I've leveled up. And you say, like, oh, you can hit 8 times. Yeah, I can do that once per long
But again,
rest.
stepping back, where, again, something happens every level. But you're hitting points where you get to increase your ability scores to hit more often, hit harder. Class abilities, like Monk, are going to see an increase in their damage die. Wizards see their damage from cantrips basically double. Rogues continually increase their sneak attack damage. Fighters get some interesting stuff going on with theirs, but everything, as you progress, you are getting stronger. Like, it doesn't feel like it when you're going up against level appropriate beings, but you are. Like, take yourself back from, you've got your level 7 monk right now, and we take you back to the first skeleton that you faced in the jungle. Like, you almost died. Now you're destroying it in one hit. Like, you are getting more powerful, but because you're getting more powerful so often, like, you don't notice the huge skip.
Maybe that's fair.
Because you're seeing an incremental increase, not these huge jumps. You're not seeing I don't want to say huge jumps, but numbers all across your sheet aren't changing every couple levels.
I think there are some very pivotal moments in most of 5e's classes, though, where you do get a huge jump.
Yeah,
Like
especially early.
Yeah.
Hitting level 3 is a huge spike.
Yeah.
So to your point about 5e not letting you play godlike characters, I will say you just argued against yourself because, first of all, cantrips are super OP compared to what wizards can do in AD&D. And I know that's kind of going against what I said earlier, but I'm just saying, no, you can't say that 5e prevents you from playing these godlike characters when you definitely have crazy powerful abilities in every class across the board, even from level 1.
I mean, I would not call cantrips crazy OP, with the exception of maybe Mage Hand under a creative player.
Eldritch Blast. Yeah.
Okay, fine. Eldritch Blast is pretty strong. But nonetheless, the existence of cantrips is, I think, an incredibly good addition for magic using characters, because you feel like a magic user at level 1. As a wizard, you're using crossbows and swords in AD&D like half the time because you only get to cast like 2 spells per session. At least with cantrips, you can consistently use magic and feel like a wizard the entire time.
Right, it also makes your character more powerful at a lower level.
But they hit about as hard as a regular sword attack would.
I think it also forces you to be far less creative. Like, I love playing wizards, and as someone who loves both 3.5 and 5e for their own reasons, 5e you don't have to think about, is this the time to cast this spell? Because you can just be like, I'll just fall back to my cantrip, it's fine. And that's good for some things.
Mhm.
That, like, I think you have to be as a wizard, or as a, well, especially a wizard, not as much a sorcerer. In 3.5, you have to be far more creative at lower levels. You have to be far more conservative. You have to be far more, is this the time to use this spell? Is there a more creative way I could use this spell?
I think it depends on the spell, though. There are spells that I think should be balanced. I don't necessarily think that Mage Hand or I guess Eldritch Blast as well should be cantrips. They should be moved up to like a level 1 spell slot. But if a Firebolt spell, I think I'm going to get this right, does like a D6 of damage, that's the equivalent of
D10.
like a D10.
Yep.
Is it really?
It's a D10.
really is.
Actually, we can put it up there with Eldritch Blast.
Yeah.
Sure. I mean, regardless, most of the combat cantrips deal somewhere between a D6 and a D10.
If the combat cantrips were stuck to like D4s or D6s and they weren't just as good as a fighter, I would agree with you.
A fighter uses a sword that can deal like a D8 of damage plus their modifier. Spells get no modifiers to their damage, and they're dealing the same.
The warlock's doing a D10 from a range though.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of spells get modifiers.
Yeah.
Not cantrips. They don't get
Yes.
bonuses to their damage.
They get bonuses to their hit though.
To their hit, yeah, but so does everybody's attack ever. Like, you use the governing skill.
But that's just this is my base weakest attack, and then they have fireballs on top of that.
I do think that spellcasters are very OP at low level, but I don't think cantrips are OP at low levels.
I'm saying it's more powerful than a wizard in AD&D.
Yeah, but I think
I'm
that
saying-
wizards were underpowered at low levels in AD&D.
Sure, I'm saying to your argument that AD&D creates godlike characters, I think the argument is moot because 5e might be different, but you're still playing godlike characters. It just seems different because you're so powerful. To Justin's point, the entire time there's less of an obvious change as you level up, whereas you start weak as shit in AD&D when you're a level 1 character, and then there's a dramatic change and you are a god killer at level 20. I like that kind of dramatic progression more than I'm powerful and balanced across the board the entire time I'm playing.
I think the only people who are unbalanced at low levels in 5e is casters.
Barbarians. At 3rd level, they take half damage from everything.
You tell that to my barbarian that almost died several times at the beginning of our campaign.
To be fair, we're playing Tomb of Annihilation, so that's a little different.
Yeah, but the one-shot death traps don't come until later. And
Yeah.
everybody's strong then.
If you pick Path of the Bear, where you take half damage to literally anything non-magical, you're a little OP.
Okay, well, before we move away from character creation, I do want to touch on a couple other elements of how enjoyable it is. For example, how long it takes to create a character in this edition, or how complex it is to create a character in this edition. I will give it to 5e.
I am not going to give that to 5e because I love making a hyper-complex character. Okay?
Okay, I will give complexity, yes, is
Complexity is
can
a
be a
plus
pro or a
and
con.
a minus.
yes, yes.
See, I, though, think AD&D is the best of both worlds. If I really wanted to make a super complex character with a background and really pinpoint everything, I'd spend a lot of time on that character, and I could make an NPC out of this world with what it gives me. But at the same time, if I need to make a quick few evil bad guy NPCs to throw out there for you, it doesn't take much time at all for me to do a complete character creation.
So 3.5 is the same way. I can roll up a human fighter in like 2 minutes. You pull the human stats, you pull the fighter stats, you're done. Simple, easy, quick. If you want to make a god killer, that's where you sit down for 4 hours. You plan out, these are the feats I'm going to
Well,
take.
but
Why are you
that's-
sitting down for 4 hours?
Because he
Making
really
a
likes
god killer.
he loves numbers, Jimmy.
Oh my god! Why don't you just play 4E?
No, because they're pre-made and that's boring.
Agreed.
I want to make my god killer out of 6 different modules.
Hi millennials, this is Jamie. Due to technical difficulties, we had to split the Great Debate into 2 separate episodes. So, the second half and the exciting conclusion of our debate about which Dungeons & Dragons edition is the best is going to air 2 weeks from today on April 12th. Yes, so let us know so far which edition you think is winning. Let us know in our comments on Facebook. You can find us at Millennial Focus Group. Let us know on Twitter at Avocado Toasters, or you can let us know on Instagram as well. We're looking forward to continuing this debate and having you guys chime in with your own opinions and letting us know which edition you think is winning. Bye, millennials!